everybody, Sean from Movie Assault here, and it's time for episode 9 of the Halloween 15 for 2025. And this time around, I wanted to take a look at The Return of the Living Dead from 1985. This is the Blu-ray that I watched for this particular episode. And this movie was written and directed by Dan O'Bannon from a story by Rudy Ritchie, John A. Russo, and Russell Streiner. If those names mean anything to you, the last three names, they may sound familiar if you're familiar with The Night of the Living Dead. This was meant to be a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. I'll get into that in a little bit, but it fell in the lap of Dan O'Bannon, and he rewrote the screenplay, and it became what it is. It stars Clu Gulager as Bert, James Karen as Frank, Don Calfa as Ernie, and Tom Matthews as Freddy. Of course, there are many other people in it as well as the punks, but I didn't want to list an entire screen full of names, so I will leave them to you to look up. One thing I wanted to say about this, usually for the Halloween 15, I review movies that I haven't seen or haven't seen in a really long time. Return of the Living Dead is a movie that I thought I hadn't seen probably since the early 90s. I remember watching it on cable probably in like 1991, 92, or at least I thought that was the last time I watched it. But as I was watching it for this review, it became apparent that I'd watched it a lot more recently than that. So I thought about disqualifying it from the Halloween 15 and replacing it with something else, but I thought, you know what, this movie is such a classic that there may be somebody out there that hasn't seen it, and this may be their first introduction to it. I highly doubt it, but if you haven't seen it, this is me telling you to go see it. Definitely get it on Blu-ray if you can, or find it on streaming. But this is a classic. And again, I did it with Oddity. I'll tell you with this one, I'm just going to tell you to stop what you're doing right now and go watch this movie. I know this is a cult classic that's been around since '85, so there are going to be people who know this movie way better than I do, because like I said, I thought I hadn't seen it since 1992. And there are going to be people who know the origins and the ins and outs of this film way better than I do. But it did start as a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. I believe it is John Russo who owns the trademark to Living Dead, The Living Dead. And of course, George Romero made Night of the Living Dead in the late 60s. And the sequel to Night of the Living Dead, the official sequel, was Dawn of the Dead in 1978. Well, Russo owned the Of the Living Dead, or Living Dead, part of it, and he was writing The Return of the Living Dead, and he wrote the screenplay with Rudy Ritchie and Russell Streiner, and it fell in the lap of Dan O'Bannon. I don't know exactly how. I don't want to get into that because I don't know, the ins and outs of it. But one thing led to another. I believe Tobe Hooper was supposed to direct it, and he got signed up to do Life Force. And so Dan O'Bannon asked if he could do it as long as he could rewrite it. And he did. And it became what it is now, which is sort of a comedy. It's not a comedy per se, but it is very humorous and a lot of fun. Takes place in 1984, famously, and around July 3rd every year you'll see the memes pop up. July 3rd, 1984, two medical warehouse workers accidentally release this trioxin gas from two containers in the basement of the medical warehouse. And while it makes them sick, it also reanimates a corpse that's carried, that they have in their meat locker, or their company's storage facility. It's not really a meat locker, but it's where they carry cadavers for medical use. And this cadaver comes alive, and it scares the crap out of them. It's Frank and Freddy. And they don't know what to do, so they call Bert, the owner of the warehouse, to come in and help them. And he comes up with this grand idea that, they saw Night of the Living Dead. the idea is if you separate the brain from the body, it should die. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't happen. So they have to come up with another way to take care of the situation. And that causes, I won't say how, but that causes a lot of problems in town and causes other dead bodies to reanimate. If you've seen any promotional material for this movie whatsoever, including the cover here, this is an interesting cover. It came with this when it was sealed in plastic, that the better known as Tarman from the movie. Its tone is darkly comedic from the beginning, but that doesn't mean that the movie lightens up on the gore or the special effects that fans of 80s movies and zombie movies in particular really look forward to from these types of movies. Not at all. It actually leans into them, incorporates them into the humor. I'd also be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that there's a load of punk music in this movie, and it adds to the fun, kind of adds to the weird, comedic, strange vibe that the movie has going on. There's a whole separate cast of characters that are these sort of cartoony Hollywood version of punks. I was never into the punk scene in the 80s, so I don't know. I'd never met anybody who was into the punk scene that acted like these people do. So, like, my only connection to the punk scene would be like watching a movie like Suburbia. Those seemed like real people. These guys do not, but they're still funny and they're real enough that you can still take them seriously as characters. But the music fits in with the portrayals of the punks in this movie. But the sense of humor that this movie has, I seriously enjoy it. It's obviously tongue-in-cheek, but it doesn't telegraph everything as a joke. So you're not sure if something's going to be sort of scary or jokey, or both. Because one thing that is interesting about this movie is it does introduce some new elements to the zombie genre. If you thought like 28 Days Later or World War Z were the first to have like running zombies, think again, because there's some interesting nuances to the zombies in this movie. Not only do they not just shuffle around like Dawn of the Dead or Night of the Living Dead, but they can talk, they can solve problems, and they're intelligent. And it's kind of cool. And if you really think about it, that would be more scary, I think, than the zombies of Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead, because you close a door and that stops those zombies. In this movie, it doesn't. They will rig up a pulley system. They'll figure out how to use a radio. So it's really interesting, and a lot of fun. So Return of the Living Dead, it's a classic. It's a love letter to the zombie genre. The horror genre. If you love horror movies and you like comedy, this is a must-see. This is a 9 out of 10. Definitely one of the best movies of the 80s as far as horror goes, and one of the best movies of the 80s, period. I really love this movie. And I did not want to keep it from you, even though I've seen it more recently than I thought I did. So definitely check out Return of the Living Dead from 1985. I believe a newer version has been put out by Arrow. I may be mistaken, but this is an old 20th Century Fox version that came out in 2015. But you should be able to find this very easily on Blu-ray for cheap and on streaming very easily. So there you go. Return of the Living Dead. Check it out. And as always, thank you for making it this far into the end, this far into the video. As always, I thank you for your attention span, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Halloween 15, which will be hitting you in 2 more days. We're getting towards the end. Hopefully, it's been fun, as fun for you as it has been for me. So stay tuned. Take it easy. Bye.